They say pellet grills can't sear a steak. So I've decided to break in my brand new Kamado Joe Pellet Joe with one of the toughest challenges pellet grills often face, getting a great sear on a big bone-in tomahawk ribeye. Let's get started. Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, and if you're new to my channel, you should know I am all in on Team Charcoal and Team Live Fire cooking. That's personally because I like my barbecue to be able to tackle anything we can throw at it, whether it's low and slow cooks like ribs or brisket, or something hot and fast like getting great pizza or even searing a steak. And it's really these high temperature cooks that limit the capability of a pellet style grill. And so naturally my curiosity was spiked when I saw Kamado Joe was going to be getting into the pellet grill business by making the Kamado Joe Pellet Joe late last year. And I wanted to know, does the ceramic dome that allows a higher temperature help take the pellet grill category into new uncharted territory, areas that it previously has struggled to succeed? And so when I did my unboxing video, one of the most popular requests, you guys went straight for the jugular here of the pellet category, is can we sear a steak? And so to do that, I've picked up a giant bone-in tomahawk ribeye steak that we are going to reverse sear on the Kamado Joe Pellet Joe today. Let me take you back and show you a little bit earlier in the day how we prepped our steak and gave it a bit of a salt brine, an accelerated salt brine. Since we're cooking this for dinner later today, we didn't have time to do overnight in our fridge. Okay, this is our tomahawk ribeye that we're going to be reverse searing today. And so if you don't have time to do a salt brine, we can accelerate this effect by leaving this steak out at room temperature a couple hours ahead of cooking. So I'm just going to use my favorite Diamond Kosher crystal salt, hit it with some salt now, and we'll add the rest of our rub and seasoning a little bit later on. So let's get this seasoned up. Okay, that looks good. I'll see you in a couple hours when it's time to start our reverse sear. All right, our steak has been marinating in that salt bath for the last couple hours, and that's gonna just really help fast track the salt getting deep into the meat so we get a nice tender, juicy steak. But it is time to get cooking. So we're gonna set up our Kamado Joe Pellet Joe to do a reverse sear at 270 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the easiest startup procedure I've ever done on a Kamado. It just involved a power button, Wi-Fi, going into my phone, typing in 270, and that's it. 10 minutes later, we pop out and we're already up to temperature. And so all I want to do now is go ahead and drop in a cast iron half moon. That is, again, it's plan B in case we need it. If we're not able to get a great Maillard reaction from the stock grid, I'll have that cast iron heat soaked and ready to go. If you've been following my channel for a while, you already know I'm a big fan of the soapstone. It's my favorite way to get a sear. I have one for the Big Joe and I have one for the Joe Jr., but I don't have one for the classic and also the Pellet Joe size, which would be the 18-inch half moon. If this works just as well with the cast iron, I might go ahead and add that because, again, that is hands down my favorite. But the method we would do if we're going to use the cast iron is to make up a little bit of mayo with some garlic, some red wine vinegar, some salt and pepper so that we have a bit of a sear sauce, as that just helps get a great looking crust on our steak. That's plan B. We'll find out if we need it or not. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and grab our temperature probe so we can add a food probe to track this cook in the iCommand app, as well as our ingredients to do our steak crust. And so my favorite way of building a steak crust is to do a couple things. First, we start with salt. Even better if we could do that overnight, but that gives us our first layer of flavor. The next layer that I like to go for is hot sauce. If you have tried Truff hot sauce, I'm a big fan of that, but if not, any Frank's Buffalo Hot will work. But I like the Truff hot sauce because it's just made with some mushroom oil and it just adds that rich, deep, earthy flavor. And you really do notice that on your tongue. You don't taste hot sauce, but you are getting that great extra, depth, smoky flavor that it provides. Then we'll add a little bit of garlic, maybe some onion powder and some pepper. No more salt because we've already salted, and that's it. So that'll give us our kind of third layer of flavor. After that, we're gonna go ahead and hit it with our smoke. So I'm using peach wood for our smoke pellets today, which will give us, again, some extra texture and character. I picked peach pellets because I often use peach smoking wood in my bigger Joes, and I wanted to try and keep things as similar as possible. And then our last layer of flavor will be that sear sauce. And so getting a great caramelization on our cast iron half moon, if that's what we end up using. So that's a quick overview of my 5-layer steak seasoning crust method. If you've never heard it before, I'm a big fan of it and I highly recommend you try it. And I can't wait to find out if the Pellet Joe can pull off a steak as good as what I'm used to on its bigger brothers. All right, it is now the moment of truth. Had no doubt in our mind that our Kamado Joe Pellet Joe could pull off the reverse sear. A lot of pellet grills can do that, but time to find out if the myth buster, can we get a great sear with the increased temperature range of 600 degrees Fahrenheit on our Pellet Joe in order to get a great crust. Not that I don't trust it, but I went ahead and made our sear sauce just in case I want to use the cast iron to get a little bit extra crust. That is personally my favorite way of getting great flavor. Whether you are cooking on the Joe Jr., Classic, Big Joe, etc., I most often go for a soapstone or a cast iron sear because I like that full surface crust. And the soapstone, in my opinion, is the absolute best. But in a pinch, since I don't have it in the classic size, hoping the cast iron can recreate some of that magic. If you have some of those, carbonate grill grates, you can get great black lines and they look amazing for photos. I just don't find they taste any better, and often the meat in between isn't getting that great crust that you get on a full surface sear. So no matter what, that is my personal preference. But we're gonna go ahead and give it a good college try on the stock grid, see what we get. But if we're not getting great color in that 30-45 seconds, we're gonna switch over to our cast iron grate and get our crust, let it rest another few minutes, and do our taste test. Let's throw it on. We're not really getting a sear here, so I don't want to completely overcook this steak. So I'm gonna switch to plan B and try our sear sauce. All right, so quick update for you. After our rest, wanted to go ahead and sear, and I was surprised how quick our Kamado Joe Pellet Joe came up to 600 degrees. It's only a matter of minutes. But there is a but. Almost immediately after seeing 600, I actually saw 630 on the dome and I was getting really excited. We might even blow well past the 600 degree range that Kamado Joe says the Pellet Joe can achieve, but then almost instantly my temperature started to fall. Now I did check the pellet hopper and I had lots of pellets left, and I wasn't able to sort of diagnose this before getting impatient. We're losing our daylight and I wanted to go ahead and cook. So when I threw it on, we were somewhere in the 520, 530 degrees Fahrenheit range, well below the temp that I saw earlier, as well as the maximum capacity. I suspect my year or two old bag of pellets might be to blame here, and so I'll have to go ahead and do some tweaking with this on some future videos to find out if it's maybe bad fuel or maybe something else that I'm just not familiar with on our maiden voyage. In terms of how did we do on the sear, you know, it's better than other pellet grills that I've used on the stock grid, but I am just used to so much more full flavor, 700-800 degrees over some big block charcoal on my classic and my Big Joe, that I wanted to go ahead and up the game a little bit. So I did our plan B and take advantage of the Kamado Joe cast iron half moon accessory. Whether you have this or the soapstone, I'm a huge fan of the sear that those provide. And once we made that move, that cast iron was hot and it actually gave a great sear. And cast iron is tricky. If you're not careful, I've overheated my cast iron before and you actually don't get a good sear. This was about the perfect temperature for our cast iron in order to give a nice crust without instantly burning or even seeing the lines or the ridges on the other side of our reversible half moon. So I'm glad we planned ahead and knew that we might need our cast iron half moon accessory for our sear today. And I'll check in the background on some future cooks if maybe my pellets that I've been using mostly for cold smoking very slowly in the garage might be to blame. Get some better fuel and try this again in the future. But enough about that, I'm not throwing in the towel. This steak looked amazing. So let's go ahead and slice into it and find out how our first cook on the Pellet Joe went and if it could turn out a winning tomahawk ribeye. All right, best part of the night. Let's go ahead and do our taste test. So I've got 2 pieces here. Set aside the rest I took inside. As you can see, my breath, it's still pretty cool. So I don't want that to cool off for the family. Let's go ahead and dig in. Good size bite. All right, I'm definitely going in for that second piece. This is different. The tenderness, good. Our salt worked. The flavors of our rub that I always use and our binder are there, but there is something different about this steak. Let me go ahead, try and see if I can get to the bottom of what I'm tasting that's a little bit new, different than I'm used to. Let's go ahead and do our second piece. So, first thoughts. If you've got one of these on order, you're thinking about getting one, I still recommend try that cast iron half moon, or even better yet, the soapstone, which is my favorite. Soapstone I love just because it doesn't rust, it's antibacterial, it's great on seafood. You can throw it in with some dish soap and give it a clean if you need to. And if you leave it outside, like I sometimes forget with my cast iron half moons, it doesn't rust. But either one of those, that crust, once we got the cast iron in there, is spot on the money. Now, what I'm tasting that's a little bit different, this has a much different smoke profile than I'm used to, where I might cook with the charcoal. So I'm missing that flavor. Like the charcoal taste is not there. Instead, all you're getting is the wood smoke. So it's actually kind of missing an element that I'm used to, but it's punching a little higher on good, clean wood smoke. And so this is just a matter of personal palate or preference getting used to. But for someone who's been cooking on a charcoal grill for over the last decade, I definitely notice a difference with this steak. For me, it's missing that charcoal flavor, but what it doesn't have in charcoal flavor, it's punching way overweight in quality, good, clean smoke. And so that's something that I've been spending the last couple of years just working on my Kamado Joe Classic or Big Joe, is getting good, clean smoke. And this leapfrogs sort of right to the end of a decade of learning of great smoke taste. So I'll play with my pellet source. This was Peachwood. I've got a couple more on order, a couple different brands, so I can find the pellet variety that I like. Anyways, I'm so glad that you decided to hang out and check out this video. We've reached the end. If you enjoyed it, please let YouTube know by smashing that thumbs up button. Let me know by hitting subscribe to catch future videos. I'd also love to hear your thoughts and ideas of what we should cook next. I'll get this temperature sorted out in terms of what peak potential is, and I think my pellets maybe are to blame here again for our lack of peak temperature and maybe the quality of our smoke. But in terms of the overall thoughts and impressions, it went better, honestly, than I thought it would for a pellet grill. So a couple points in the bank, but I'm not gonna do any review or complete thoughts until we get a number of different cooks and we can speak from good experience with good pellets and everything together in order to give this an official review. If you'd like to see that review video, just make sure you've got the notification bell turned on so you're alerted when it comes out. Until next time, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue signing off, and remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.